Hello, in this tutorial I'd like to talk a little bit about the texture, breakup, and variation options that are built into the Aziel Arts material. We have a bunch of different features built in that help your textures tile organically across your landscape and look realistic in the distance or close up. There's a bunch of different things that are happening in this material, so I'd like to just walk you through some of those options so that you know what to tweak in the future when you're working on your own materials. So I think that the easiest way to talk about this is just to come over to my master material, and I'll make a new instance of the material without any textures assigned. So I'm going to come over here and expand my textures. You can see I have a single layer assigned to this landscape and a single set of textures. Now, for each landscape layer or snow layer or any type of material layer that's set up in the material, there is a set of close texture samples and far texture samples. It's sampling the same textures here, but it's giving them slightly different UV sizes. And you can see here in the close range, we have a certain size for our squares, and in the distance, we have a larger size that repeats better over a larger landscape, a distant kind of view of a landscape. And these two texture sizes can be found under the texture size settings area. So you can see we have one layer, so we just have settings for one layer. And if we enable it, we can see that our UV sizes for the far texture is 0.1 and near is 1. And so if we lower down our far UV size to like 0.01, you can see it gets even bigger in the distance. And the kind of blending between these close and far versions of the textures is adjusted in the distance and slope blending area. This will allow me to adjust the distance, length, and offset of the blend. So the offset's going to push it further into the distance. If I go ahead and start increasing that, you can see I'm pushing that blend further into the distance. And if I increase the blend fade length, I'm increasing the smoothness at which it blends between this close version of the textures and the far version of the textures. And you'll find that it goes a long way for your textures just to have these two different versions set up. So you're still using the same grass texture, for example, but it looks a lot better when it's scaled up in the distance. For some reason, when we're using textures in our landscape, that tends to give a much more natural look. So that's one option you have available to you to deal with texture repeating. The next one here is under texture breakup. So texture breakup is going to take these existing textures and break them up and scramble them and make them not repeat in a grid. And you might be familiar with texture bombing, which is a form of this, but this is a lighter weight version of texture bombing that is going to allow us to take even a grid texture like this and make it look a lot more organic. So if I come over here and switch these on under texture breakup, you can see we have the option to use it on our close textures or our far textures or both. So if I just turn it on my close textures here, you can see what's happening. It's basically taking little patches of the texture and scrambling them around so that they look a lot more organic and natural. And you can imagine this works really well with grass, with dirt, with all kinds of different textures that tend to have a repeating look to them. You can always just use this to help fix that. And we can also turn this on their distant textures as well. So we're using on both the close and the far textures. Within this setting, we also have the quad blending, which is just the blending between those different patches. Also have turning on UV breakup rotation, which I don't really recommend doing unless you absolutely need to. It adds extra complexity. And most often than not, I find I can get a great look just with the standard translation scrambling. I don't usually need rotation in order to get it to look organic, but that's there available to you if you'd like to use it. And we also have the quad scale, which is, if you can imagine, the size of the patches during the breakup. The third type of variation that we have in the material is color variation. So you can see here in the texture input, we have a variation texture, which is a noise. This noise is connected into the base color section here. And we have a variation control, variation color 1, color 2, and color 3, variation size, and variation strength. And these are pretty self-explanatory what they're doing. If I increase the variation strength for us to really see it aggressively, you can see that it's adding a little bit of color variation in a noise pattern across all of your landscape layers. You can see that we can adjust those colors specifically. If we don't want to see any blue, we want it to just be a sort of a browny kind of warm type of breakup, we could do something like this, and again, lower the variation strength so it's not quite so intense. We could also increase the variation size so it's a larger noise size. Completely up to you, but it's a great way to add variation to your landscape layers. Something I do want to mention, that if you are using snow, which I will just briefly turn on here just to show you the setting. If you are using the snow layer, occasionally we want to add color variation to our landscape layers, but not to our snow layer, because our snow should be white, so it shouldn't be having any of this weird discoloration. It kind of looks dirty. So with our snow layer turned on, we can see that there is a snow use color variation. So by default, it's not using color variation, but if you do want to, for some reason, use color variation on your snow layer, this is where you could go ahead and enable it. Otherwise, it is bypassing the color variation option. So those are 3 ways to add variation to your texture, to your landscape textures. You can check out some of my material instances for some of my settings that I've set up using these 3 options. Hopefully you found this video helpful. I will see you in the next one.